The great hall of Nexus Prime stretched far beyond what human eyes could see. Crystal walls rose up like mountains, glowing with soft blue light that came from somewhere deep inside the stone. The air felt thick and heavy, filled with strange smells that made Hyunwoo Kim's nose wrinkle. He stood at a small podium in the center of the massive room, feeling very small. Around him sat the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They came in shapes that would give children nightmares back on Earth. Some looked like giant lizards with too many teeth. Others were made of what seemed like living light, floating and shifting without any solid form. There were creatures that looked like massive insects, their many eyes all focused on him with what he could only guess was amusement. Hyunwoo wore his best diplomatic uniform, the dark blue fabric crisp and clean. The small flag patch on his shoulder showed Earth, a tiny blue dot that these beings probably could not even find on their star maps. His hands shook just a little as he held the formal request document. 30 pages of careful writing, explaining why humanity deserved a place in the Galactic Council. "Honored members of the Council," Hyunwoo began, his voice echoing strangely in the vast space. "I come before you today to request membership for the human species in this great organization. We may be new to space travel, but we have much to offer." The first sound that answered him was not words, it was laughter, but not the kind of laughter humans made. The giant lizard creature at the front made a sound like rocks grinding together. The insect beings created a high-pitched buzzing that hurt his ears. The light creatures pulsed brighter and dimmer in a rhythm that somehow felt mocking. Veltar, the leader of the reptilian hegemon, spoke first. His voice was deep and rough, like stones falling down a mountain. "Human," he said, making the word sound like an insult. "You stand before beings who have ruled the stars for millions of years. Your species learned to make fire only yesterday in galactic time." More laughter filled the hall. Hyunwoo felt his face grow hot, but he kept standing straight. He had expected this. The reports from the first contact team had warned him that most alien species saw humans as children, playing with toys they did not understand. Zixana, the queen of the insect race, clicked her mandibles together in what passed for speech among her kind. A translation device near Hyunwoo's ear turned her sounds into words he could understand. 12 ships, she said. And somehow the mechanical voice managed to sound amused. "Your entire fleet consists of 12 small ships. My personal guard has more vessels than your whole species." The floating light beings, who called themselves the Morden Collective, spoke all at once. Their voices merged into one strange harmony. "We have searched your minds from afar, human. You possess no telepathic abilities, no power to bend energy with thought alone, no connection to the quantum web that binds all consciousness. You are blind and deaf to the true universe." Hyunwoo waited for the laughter to die down before speaking again. "It is true that we are young," he said carefully. "It is true that our fleet is small, but we have qualities that might surprise you. We have survived wars, disasters, and near extinction on our world. We have learned to adapt and overcome." Veltar leaned forward on his massive throne, yellow eyes gleaming with what looked like hunger. "Survived?" he rumbled. "Child species, you have never faced a real threat. You fought amongst yourselves with primitive weapons on a single world. You know nothing of true warfare." A creature that looked like a walking tree, covered in bark and moss, creaked when it spoke. "Your technology is crude. Your ships move by burning chemicals and pushing against space. Children's toys compared to our quantum drives and reality manipulation engines." The insults continued for what felt like hours. They mocked human appearance, calling them hairless apes and barely evolved mammals. They laughed at human culture, saying their art was simple and their music was noise. They dismissed human science as Stone Age fumbling compared to their ancient knowledge. Through it all, Hyunwoo stood and listened. In the observer section behind him, Captain Dae-hyun Park sat with the rest of the human delegation. Dae-hyun's hands were clenched into fists, and Hyunwoo could see the anger in his old friend's eyes. But they had planned for this. They had expected exactly this reaction. Finally, Veltar raised one clawed hand for silence. "The Galactic Council has reached its decision," he announced. The species known as humans is denied membership in this organization. However, in our infinite mercy, we grant you observer status. Observer status? Hyunwoo asked, though he already knew what it meant. You may watch and learn, Zixana explained, her translated voice dripping with false kindness. You may see how real civilizations conduct themselves. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when you have grown beyond your current primitive state, you may apply again. The Mordoon Collective added their own conditions. You will remain within your home system. You will not attempt to colonize other worlds without permission. You will not interfere in galactic affairs. Consider this protection. There are many species who would see you as nothing more than interesting specimens for their laboratories. More laughter echoed through the hall. Some of the alien beings were already leaving, dismissing humanity as unworthy of further attention. A few stayed to stare at the humans like they were animals in a zoo. Hyunwoo bowed formally. The human delegation thanks the council for its time and consideration, he said in the same calm voice he had used throughout the session. We accept observer status and will follow the conditions you have set. As the session officially ended and the great hall began to empty, Hyunwoo walked back to join his team. Captain Daehyun met him halfway, his face dark with anger. How can you stay so calm? Daehyun whispered. They treated us like insects, like we don't even deserve to exist in the same galaxy as them. Hyunwoo smiled for the first time since entering the hall. It was a cold smile that did not reach his eyes, because they reacted exactly as we predicted they would, he said quietly. Arrogance makes beings blind. They see only what they expect to see. The human delegation gathered their things and prepared to leave Nexus Prime. As they walked toward their small transport ship, aliens continued to point and laugh at them. Some took pictures as if humans were exotic animals they had never seen before. But as they reached their ship, Hyunwoo did something that none of the watching aliens understood. He pulled out a small communication device no bigger than his thumb. The device looked like nothing special, just another piece of primitive human technology. He pressed a single button and spoke one word into the device. Proceed. The signal traveled faster than light, jumping through quantum relays that the aliens had not bothered to track. It passed through their monitoring systems like it did not exist, using frequencies that no scanner was programmed to detect. The message crossed vast distances in seconds, reaching its destination in the cold darkness beyond the outer edge of human space. Far away, in a place where no alien patrol had ever been, something very large began to wake up. Systems that had been sleeping for decades came online one by one. Weapons that could crack planets started their charging cycles. And deep in the heart of humanity's greatest secret, thousands of minds began to prepare for war. The aliens had laughed at humanity's 12 small ships. They had mocked human weakness and primitive technology. They had dismissed Earth's children as nothing more than amusing pets who would stay quietly in their corner of the galaxy. They had no idea that humanity's real fleet had never been seen. They did not know about the technologies that human scientists had developed in secret. They could not imagine that the species they had just humiliated possessed weapons that could break more than just ships. As the human transport ship left Nexus Prime, carrying its delegation back toward Earth, Hyunwoo looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, ancient and powerful civilizations continued their business, secure in their belief that they ruled the galaxy. Soon, they would learn how wrong they were. Soon, they would discover that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you never take seriously. The laughter would stop, and it would never start again. 6 months had passed since the humiliation at Nexus Prime. The galaxy had mostly forgotten about the small species called humans, except when they needed something to laugh about. Most alien civilizations went back to their important business of ruling star systems and making trade deals worth more money than humans had ever seen. But Veltar had not forgotten. The massive reptilian leader sat in his command throne aboard the flagship Deathbringer, staring at a holographic map of human space. His yellow eyes gleamed with cruel satisfaction as he planned what he called an educational demonstration. 200 ships should be more than enough, Veltar told his fleet commander Kethmore. We will destroy a few of their outer colonies and orbital stations. Nothing too destructive. We want to teach them their place, not wipe them out completely." Kethmore nodded his scaled head. He was smaller than Veltar, but still huge by human standards, with sharp teeth and claws that could cut through metal. "The Council approved this action?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The Council does not need to approve Pest. "Control!" Veltar laughed, the sound like rocks grinding in a landslide. "We told them we were conducting military exercises near human space. If a few human installations happen to get destroyed during our training, well, that will teach other young species to know their place." The Hegemon fleet was impressive by any measure. 200 warships, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. Their hulls were made of metal that could survive direct hits from nuclear weapons. Their shields could stop energy beams that would boil oceans. Their weapons could crack moons and turn asteroids into dust. Each ship carried thousands of reptilian warriors, all eager to prove their strength against the weak humans. They had been told this would be an easy victory, a chance to win glory against enemies who could barely fight back. The younger warriors especially looked forward to collecting human prisoners and technology as trophies. Meanwhile, in the solar system, Admiral Sojin Lee watched the approaching alien fleet from her command center on Luna Base. The base was built inside the moon itself, hidden from casual observation but equipped with the most advanced sensors humanity could build. She could see every alien ship, track their weapons, and monitor their communications. 200 ships, reported her aide, Lieutenant Jun Ho. "They're not even trying to hide their approach. They want us to see them coming." So Jin nodded grimly. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but everyone who served under her knew she had a mind like a steel trap. "Of course they do. This isn't an invasion. It's a demonstration. They want to scare us into complete submission." Around Earth and throughout the solar system, human colonies received emergency broadcasts. Evacuation orders went out to all civilian stations. News networks showed terrifying images of the approaching alien armada, comparing it to humanity's tiny defensive fleet. Panic spread like wildfire through human space. On Earth itself, crowds gathered in the streets to watch the sky. Children cried as their parents tried to explain what was happening. Religious leaders held emergency prayer services. Government officials made speeches about courage and resistance, but their voices shook with fear that seemed very real. Captain Daehyun Park received his orders while aboard the UES Incheon, humanity's newest destroyer. The ship was sleek and fast, but still tiny compared to the alien vessels approaching their system. Daehyun had served in the human navy for 20 years, rising through the ranks during the space expansion period. "Captain," his communications officer reported, "Admiral Lee wants to speak with you directly." So Jin's face appeared on the main screen, her expression serious. "Daehyun, you know what we have to do." "Yes, Admiral. Are we really going through with the plan?" "The signal was sent 6 months ago. Everything is in motion now. You just need to make it look good." Daehyun understood. He turned to address his crew, all of whom had volunteered for this mission, knowing the risks. "All hands, this is the captain speaking. You all know why we're here. Today we face an enemy that thinks we're weak and helpless. Our job is to make sure they keep thinking that way. The human fleet consisted of 12 ships total, destroyers, frigates, and cruisers that looked impressive by human standards, but were dwarfed by the alien vessels. As the Hegemon fleet entered the outer solar system, these 12 ships moved to intercept them near Jupiter's orbit. Veltar watched the approaching human ships with amusement. "Look at them," he said to his bridge crew. 12 tiny ships coming to fight 200. Either they are incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." "Probably both," Kethmore replied. "Shall we destroy them quickly and move on to their colonies?" "No. Let them speak first. I want to hear them beg." The communication channel opened, and Captain Daehyun's face appeared on screens throughout the alien fleet. He looked calm despite facing impossible odds, his uniform clean and his voice steady. "This is Captain Park of the United Earth ship Incheon commanding the Sol Defense Fleet. You are entering human space without permission. Turn around and leave, or we will be forced to defend our territory." Laughter erupted across every alien bridge. The idea that 12 small ships could threaten their massive fleet was so ridiculous that even the normally serious hegemon warriors found it funny. Veltar decided to respond personally. "Human Captain, I am Veltar, Supreme Commander of the Hegemon First Fleet. You face 200 warships with weapons that could shatter your planets. Surrender now, and we will spare your homeworld. Resist, and learn why we rule the galaxy." Dae-hyun's response came without hesitation. "This is humanity's answer. We don't surrender. We adapt." The first battle began near Jupiter's massive bulk. The human ships spread out in a formation that military experts would later call either brilliant or suicidal. They used Jupiter's gravity and radiation to mask their movements, striking at the alien fleet's edges with hit-and-run attacks. For a few minutes, it almost looked like the humans might have a chance. Their ships were fast, and their captains were clever. They managed to damage several alien vessels and even destroy a few smaller escort ships. The human crews fought with desperate courage, knowing their homes depended on them. But the outcome was never really in doubt. The alien fleet had too many ships, too much firepower, and shields too strong for human weapons to penetrate easily. One by one, human ships began to fall. The UES Seoul went first, overwhelmed by enemy fire while covering the retreat of civilian transports. The UES Busan followed, ramming an alien cruiser in a desperate suicide attack. The UES Daegu fought until its reactor went critical, taking 2 enemy ships with it when it exploded. To watching eyes throughout the galaxy, it looked like a heroic but hopeless last stand. Human courage was impressive, but courage could not stop energy beams that could melt continents. The alien fleet pressed forward, confident in their easy victory. What none of them noticed was that the destroyed ship's crews had escaped in small stealth pods just before their vessels were lost. The pods were too small for alien sensors to detect, designed to look like space debris. They drifted away from the battle, their occupants very much alive despite what their enemies believed. And something else moved through the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Something that did not appear on any scanner, did not reflect any search beam, and made no sound as it glided through the cold darkness of space. Kethmore studied the tactical display as the human fleet continued to fall back toward Mars. "They're fighting better than expected," he admitted to his staff, "but the result is inevitable. We'll reach Earth orbit within 6 hours. Should we accept surrender when they offer it?" asked his weapons officer. "Veltar wants to make an example. A few destroyed colonies should be enough to teach them proper respect." As the alien fleet advanced, they passed through the asteroid belt without paying much attention to the floating rocks around them. Why would they? Their sensors showed nothing but dead stone and ice, debris left over from the formation of the solar system billions of years ago. They had no way of knowing that one of those asteroids was not an asteroid at all. It was something that had been waiting in the cold and darkness for 6 months, powered down and silent, invisible to every scanning method the aliens possessed. Soon, very soon, they would learn that humanity's 12 ships were not their only fleet. They would discover that the species they had dismissed as primitive children had been preparing for this day since the moment they first encountered alien life. The trap was almost ready to spring. The aliens had taken the bait perfectly, convinced of their own superiority and humanity's weakness. They were exactly where humanity wanted them to be. And in the hidden depths of space, something vast and terrible was beginning to wake up. The alien fleet pushed deeper into human space, leaving a trail of destroyed human ships behind them. Veltar sat on his command throne, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. The humans were retreating toward their home planet, just as he had predicted. Soon he would be in orbit around Earth, ready to demonstrate the price of defying the Galactic Council. "Sir," reported his sensor officer, "the remaining human ships are falling back to Earth orbit. They appear to be forming some kind of defensive line around their planet." Veltar laughed, a sound like grinding stone. 9 ships left out of 12. And they think they can defend their world against 200 of our vessels. These humans are either very brave or very stupid. "Perhaps both," Kethmore suggested. "But their retreat pattern is unusual. They're not running in panic. They're conducting an organized withdrawal, almost like they're following a predetermined plan." "Of course they have a plan," Veltar replied dismissively. "Every species has emergency protocols." It won't help them. Back on Luna Base, Admiral So-Jin Lee watched the alien advance with calm eyes. Her staff moved around her with quiet efficiency, monitoring hundreds of data streams from across the solar system. The Admiral had gray hair and a lined face that spoke of decades in command, but her voice remained steady as she gave the order that would change everything. Signal all remaining fleet units to fall back to Earth orbital defense. Grid, she commanded, and initiate Protocol Omega. Lieutenant Jun-Ho looked up from his communication station. Ma'am, are you certain? Once we activate Protocol Omega, there's no going back. So, Jin nodded firmly. The decision was made 6 months ago. It's time for the galaxy to learn who we really are. The order went out on quantum-encrypted channels, using communication methods that alien science had never encountered. Deep in the Kuiper Belt, far beyond the orbit of Pluto, something that had been sleeping for decades began to respond. At first, there was nothing visible, just the same empty darkness that had existed there for years. Space looked exactly as it always had, cold and black, and seemingly lifeless. But appearances can be deceiving, especially when dealing with technology that the galaxy's greatest civilizations had never imagined. Slowly, like a mountain rising from the sea, the largest structure ever built by human hands began to shimmer into existence. It started as a faint outline against the stars, barely visible even to the most sensitive instruments. Then the outline grew more solid, more real, as stealth systems that had hidden it for 30 years finally deactivated. The UHSS Taeguk was impossible by every standard the galaxy used to measure such things. It was bigger than space stations that housed millions of beings. It was longer than some of the smaller moons in the solar system. Its hull was smooth and dark, covered in materials that seemed to bend light around them in strange ways. But size was not the most impressive thing about the ship. As its power systems came online, energy readings began to spike across every monitoring station in the solar system. The Taeguk was generating power equivalent to an entire star system, drawing energy from sources that violated everything aliens thought they knew about physics. Dr. Min-Ho Choi stood in the ship's central laboratory, watching readouts that would have driven alien scientists insane with confusion. He was a small man with thick glasses and hands that shook slightly from too much caffeine, but his mind was one of the sharpest in human space. For 30 years, he had worked on Project Mindbridge, developing technology that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Power levels reaching optimal ranges, he reported to the ship's bridge. Mindbridge array shows green across all systems. We're ready to begin full activation. Captain Yeonji Seo acknowledged the report from her command chair. She was younger than most ship captains, chosen for this command not because of her age, but because of her unique mental abilities. Like everyone aboard the Taeguk, she had been selected through tests that measured more than just intelligence or skill. All hands, this is the captain, she announced over the ship's communication system. For 30 years, we have prepared for this moment. Our families, our friends, our entire species have been dismissed as primitive children by civilizations that think they rule the galaxy. Today, they learn that humanity's greatest weapon isn't our ships or our guns. It's our minds. The Taeguk carried a crew of 50,000, but these were not ordinary sailors and soldiers. Each person aboard had undergone years of training in techniques that combined advanced neuroscience with meditation, psychology with quantum mechanics. They had learned to use their minds in ways that no other species had ever attempted. Meanwhile, the alien fleet continued its advance toward Earth, unaware that anything had changed. Their sensors showed the same readings they had always shown. Empty space behind them, a few small human ships ahead of them, and a blue planet that would soon learn the price of defying superior civilizations. Kethmore studied his tactical display as they passed the orbit of Mars. The humans appear to be broadcasting something, he reported to Veltar. Multiple signals on different frequencies, all aimed back toward their outer system. Probably calling for help from their colonies, Veltar replied with amusement. Let them waste their time. There's no one out there who can save them now. But the alien commander was wrong. As the Taeguk systems reached full power, every monitoring station in the galaxy suddenly detected an energy signature unlike anything they had ever recorded. The massive ship was no longer hidden, and its presence sent shockwaves through the galactic intelligence networks. On the bridge of his flagship, Veltar stared at his sensor display in confusion. "What is that?" he demanded. "Where did it come from?" His science officer, a young hegemon named Korval, worked frantically at his instruments. "Sir, I'm reading a massive artificial structure in the outer system. It's enormous, larger than anything in our databases." "That's impossible," Kethmore said, joining them at the sensor station. "Our scouts surveyed this entire system before we attacked. There was nothing there but empty space and a few small asteroids." "The energy output is impossible too," Korval reported, his voice shaking slightly. "It's generating power levels that would require harvesting multiple stars. And the signatures? I've never seen anything like them." Veltar felt the first cold touch of doubt in his mind. Could it be some kind of secret weapon, a doomsday device the humans built to destroy us all? "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the structure. It's identifying itself as a human warship." The main screen flickered and changed, showing a human woman in a uniform that looked similar to those worn by the defeated fleet captains. But there was something different about this one, something in her eyes that suggested depths the aliens had not suspected. "This is Captain Yunji Seo of the United Human Ship Taiguk," she said calmly. "You have entered our space without permission and attacked our people. You believe us to be weak because we lack the mental abilities that your species take for granted. You are about to learn why that assumption is a mistake." Veltar leaned forward, his massive form dwarfing the communication console. "Human captain, your ship may be large, but you face 200 vessels of the hegemon fleet. Surrender now, and we may show mercy." Yunji's smile was cold and strange. "You still don't understand. This isn't about ship-to-ship combat. This isn't about weapons or shields or who has the bigger guns. This is about consciousness itself. And humanity has been exploring that frontier, while your species rested on their ancient achievements." She gestured to someone off-screen, and every alien in the fleet suddenly felt something impossible. It started as a whisper at the edge of their thoughts, barely noticeable, but then it grew stronger, more persistent. Something was touching their minds, something that felt completely alien and wrong. Dr. Minho's voice came over the Taiguk's communication system, speaking to the crew but also being transmitted to the alien fleet. "Mind bridge array at full power. All crew members begin the process. Remember your training. Focus your thoughts. Show them what human consciousness really looks like." And across space, 50,000 human minds reached out as one, touching the ordered thoughts of alien species that had never evolved to handle such contact. The effect was immediate and devastating. On every alien ship, crew members staggered as human consciousness flooded into their minds. They felt things they had never felt before: individual creativity, personal ambition, the chaotic beauty of thoughts that belonged to no collective. Their ordered, hierarchical mental structures began to crack under the pressure of contact with minds that were utterly, completely alone. Kethmore grabbed his command chair as waves of foreign emotion crashed through his consciousness. For the first time in his life, he felt what it was like to be truly individual, to have thoughts that belonged to no one but himself. The experience was terrifying and wonderful and completely overwhelming. "What's happening?" Veltar roared, but his own voice sounded strange in his ears. For just a moment, he had seen through human eyes, had felt the weight of being the only consciousness in a skull, the terrible loneliness and incredible strength that came from true individuality. The alien fleet began to drift as crew members across 200 ships experienced the impossible. Captain Unjisio stood on the bridge of the Taiguk, watching as her crew prepared to unleash humanity's greatest secret upon the galaxy. Around her, 50,000 trained minds focused their thoughts into a weapon that no alien civilization had ever imagined possible. "Mind bridge array at maximum power," Dr. Minho reported from his station. "All crew members are synchronized and ready. The alien fleet is within optimal range." Yunji nodded and gave the order that would change everything. "Activate full consciousness projection. Show them what it means to be human." The effect was like a storm made of pure thought. Across the vast distance between the Taiguk and the alien fleet, Human consciousness reached out and touched every mind within range. But this was not the gentle telepathy that some alien species use to communicate. This was something far more powerful and alien, the raw, unfiltered experience of being individually conscious in a universe where most thinking beings shared their thoughts with others. On the bridge of the Hegemon flagship, Veltar felt his ordered mind begin to collapse as human memories flooded through his consciousness. He saw through human eyes the long history of his species, from small mammals hiding in caves to beings that could build ships capable of crossing between stars. He felt the emotions that drove humans forward: fear and hope, love and hate, the desperate need to survive against impossible odds. But most terrifying of all, he experienced what it was like to be truly alone in his own mind. For the first time in his life, Veltar felt what it was like to have thoughts that belonged to no one else, to be the only consciousness in his skull. The Hegemon species had evolved as pack hunters with shared mental connections. The idea of complete mental isolation was beyond their ability to understand. "Make it stop!" Veltar roared, clutching his head as human concepts of individual creativity and rebellion crashed through his mind. He tried to reach out for the mental comfort of his pack brothers, but the human consciousness was too strong, too chaotic. It overwhelmed his species' natural telepathic abilities. Kethmore was faring no better. The fleet commander staggered around his bridge as human memories of warfare filled his mind. He saw battles fought not for territory or resources, but for ideas like freedom and justice that his species had never developed. He felt the human concept of death before dishonor, the idea that some things were more important than survival itself. "Sir," his communications officer gasped. "The other ships are reporting similar effects. Crew members are experiencing neural overloads across the entire fleet." Dr. Minho monitored the effect from his laboratory aboard the Teguk. Decades of research into human consciousness had led to this moment. His instruments showed the alien minds trying desperately to process human thought patterns, but failing as their more rigid mental structures proved unable to handle the chaos of individual consciousness. Neural cascade failures detected across their fleet, he reported to Captain Yunji. Their minds are structured for collective thinking. Individual consciousness is literally breaking their ability to function normally. The human crew of the Teguk felt the strain too, but they had trained for years to handle this kind of mental projection. Each person aboard had undergone psychological conditioning that allowed them to share their consciousness while maintaining their individual identity. They were living weapons, trained to use their minds as tools of war. On the alien ships, the effects grew worse by the minute. Hegemon warriors who had never questioned an order in their lives suddenly found themselves filled with human concepts of personal choice and individual responsibility. Some began to refuse commands from their officers, not out of rebellion, but because they literally could not understand how to obey when their minds were suddenly their own. The insectoid crew members suffered even more. Their species had evolved as a hive mind, with individual thoughts being almost unknown among them. Contact with human consciousness was like poison to their mental structure. Some fell into catatonic states, unable to process the idea of being separate from the collective. Others became obsessed with human concepts they could not understand, repeating words like freedom and independence without knowing what they meant. Most affected of all were the Mordoon collective, the energy beings who had mocked humanity's lack of telepathic abilities. Their entire existence was based on shared consciousness. They literally did not exist as individuals. Contact with human minds caused their collective identity to fragment into thousands of separate voices, each one confused and terrified by the experience of being alone. Captain Dae-hyun, now aboard the Teguk after his ship had been destroyed, watched the tactical display as the alien fleet began to tear itself apart. "Target the command vessels," he suggested to Unji. "Focus the projection on their leadership." "Already doing it," she replied. "But we don't need to destroy them. Their own minds are doing that for us." Indeed, across the alien fleet, ships began to drift out of formation as their crews lost the ability to function as organized military units. Some vessels fired their weapons randomly, not at the humans, but at empty space, as confused alien minds tried to process experiences they had never been designed to handle. On one Hegemon cruiser, The entire crew had become convinced that they were actually humans who had somehow been trapped in alien bodies. They were trying to rewrite their ship's computer systems to display human languages and play human music. The ship's captain had locked himself in his quarters, repeatedly stating that he needed to find his individual purpose, a concept that had no meaning in hegemon society. An insectoid destroyer had stopped moving entirely because its crew was experiencing their first individual thoughts and could not decide what to do without guidance from the hive mind. They sat at their stations, staring at their instruments in confusion, unable to remember how to operate equipment they had used for years. A Morden energy ship had begun to pulse with chaotic patterns as its collective consciousness broke down into individual components. Each part of the ship was now controlled by a separate mind, and they could not coordinate their actions. The vessel spun helplessly through space, its crew too fragmented to function. Dr. Minho studied the readings from across the alien fleet with scientific fascination. "The effect is even stronger than our models predicted," he reported. "Human consciousness appears to be fundamentally incompatible with their mental structures. Prolonged exposure is causing permanent changes to their neural patterns. Some aliens were beginning to adapt, but not in ways their leaders had expected. A few hegemon warriors had embraced the concept of individual choice and were now questioning the entire structure of their society. They wanted to know why they had to follow orders without question, why their species valued conformity over creativity. Several insectoid drones had broken free from their hive programming entirely and were trying to establish personal identities. They gave themselves individual names and began expressing personal preferences about everything from food to music. Their queen, monitoring from a safe distance, was horrified by what she saw as the complete corruption of her children. The energy beings of the Morden collective were perhaps changing the most. Those who survived the initial fragmentation found themselves experiencing individual awareness for the first time in their species' history. Some were terrified by the loneliness, but others were fascinated by the freedom to have private thoughts and personal opinions. Veltar tried one last time to rally his fleet, but his voice sounded strange over the communication channels. "All ships," he commanded, but then stopped. For the first time in his life, he wondered if giving orders was actually the right thing to do. The human concept of moral responsibility had infected his thoughts, making him question whether he had the right to command others to fight and die. "Sir?" Kethmore asked, but his commander could not answer. Veltar was experiencing human memories of soldiers who had disobeyed illegal orders, who had chosen conscience over obedience. The idea that a superior officer could be wrong was so alien to Hegemon, thinking that it was literally breaking his ability to function as a military leader. Captain Yunji watched the chaos spreading through the alien fleet and felt a moment of something that might have been pity. "Dr. Minho," she asked, "is there any way to reverse the effects?" The scientist shook his head. "The changes appear to be permanent. Once a mind has experienced true individual consciousness, it can never go back to being purely collective. They're becoming more like us, whether they want to or not." The alien fleet was no longer a threat. 200 warships drifted through space, their crews too confused and mentally altered to continue fighting. Some ships were heading back toward their home systems, carrying crews who would never again be the same. Others simply sat motionless, their occupants trying to understand what had happened to them. Humanity had won its first galactic war without firing a single shot. They had defeated a superior enemy not with better weapons or stronger shields, but by simply being human and forcing their enemies to experience what that really meant. The galaxy would never be the same. Word of what had happened would spread to every civilization, every species, every world. They would learn that the primitive humans they had dismissed possessed a form of consciousness. So, news of the Hegemon fleet's mysterious defeat spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light itself. Quantum communication networks carried the impossible story from world to world. 200 of the galaxy's most advanced warships had been defeated not by superior weapons, but by something that defied every understanding of modern warfare. The first reports were dismissed as propaganda or mistaken sensor readings. How could a fleet that had conquered dozens of star systems simply stop fighting and drift helplessly through space? How could the primitive humans, with their 12 small ships, accomplish what entire civilizations had failed to do for millions of years? But as more evidence arrived, sensor logs from neutral observers, communication recordings from the alien ships themselves, testimonies from the few crew members who had managed to send messages home, the galaxy began to realize that something unprecedented had occurred. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The great crystal hall that had echoed with laughter at humanity's expense 6 months earlier was now filled with worried whispers and fearful glances. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss what some were calling the human incident. Ambassador Hyun-Woo Kim stood at the same podium where he had been humiliated before. But this time the atmosphere was completely different. No one was laughing now. The alien delegates stared at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright terror. Honored members of the council, Hyun-Woo began, his voice carrying easily through the vast space. 6 months ago, you dismissed humanity as a primitive species unworthy of membership in your organization. You laughed at our small fleet and mocked our lack of telepathic abilities. Today, I return to explain why that was a mistake. The Zixana Queen, her multiple eyes focused on the human ambassador, spoke first. What did your species do to the hegemon fleet? Our scientists cannot explain the sensor readings. Your ships never fired a weapon, yet 200 warships were rendered completely helpless. You're correct, Hyun-Woo replied calmly. We did not use conventional weapons. We used something far more powerful. Our minds. A ripple of confusion passed through the assembly. The tree-like delegate from the Vorthak Confederation creaked as it spoke. Impossible. Your species possesses no telepathic abilities. We tested this during first contact. Dr. Yun Seo Park, humanity's chief xenopsychologist, stepped forward to join Hyun-Woo at the podium. She was an elderly woman with white hair and sharp eyes behind thick glasses, and she had spent her entire career studying alien mental structures. You tested for telepathy as you understand it, she explained. The ability to share thoughts directly with other minds. But you never tested for the power of isolated consciousness, minds that have evolved to exist completely alone. What does that mean? Demanded a representative of the Crystalline Shard Collective. Dr. Yun Seo activated a holographic display that showed brain scans from various species. Every major civilization in the galaxy evolved some form of shared consciousness, telepathy, hive minds, collective awareness. You all developed ways to connect your thoughts with others. This gave you great advantages in cooperation and coordination. The display shifted to show human brain patterns, which looked chaotic and disorganized compared to the others. Humans evolved differently. We developed individual consciousness so strong and isolated that it became weaponized. Our minds learned to exist in complete mental solitude, which made them incredibly powerful and completely alien to species like yours. The Morden Collective, speaking in voices that sounded fractured and uncertain for the first time in recorded history, asked, "What happened to our people?" The few survivors speak of experiences we cannot understand. They claim to have become individuals, but we do not know what this means. Your people experienced human consciousness directly, Hyun-Woo explained. For the first time in their existence, they felt what it was like to have thoughts that belonged to no one else. The experience was so alien to their mental structure that it permanently altered their neural patterns. Panic began to spread through the assembly as the implications became clear. If humans could simply project their consciousness and drive other species insane with the experience, then no military force in the galaxy could stand against them. The delegate from the ethereal Dominion, a being of pure energy similar to the Mordun, flickered with agitation. Are you threatening us? Is this some kind of psychological warfare designed to force our submission? Not at all, Hyun-Woo replied. We're explaining reality. You attacked us with the intent to destroy our colonies and terrorize our people. We defended ourselves using the only advantage we possess, our minds. The fact that this defense was more effective than you expected is not our fault. Admiral Sojin Lee's image appeared on communication screens throughout the hall. She was speaking from Luna Base, her tired eyes reflecting the weight of command. During humanity's first galactic crisis, the Taeguk and her sister ships represent 30 years of secret development, she announced. While you dismissed us as primitive, We were studying your mental structures and developing countermeasures. Every human colony, every military vessel, every citizen has been trained in consciousness projection techniques. The revelation hit the assembly like a physical blow. Several delegates actually stepped backward, and others began urgent conversations with their home governments through quantum communicators. "You mean every human is a potential weapon?" asked the hegemon representative, one of the few who had been permitted to speak for his people since the defeat of their fleet. "Every human is potentially dangerous to species that rely on shared consciousness," Dr. Yunseo confirmed, "just as you would be dangerous to us if we relied on telepathy. The difference is that individual consciousness appears to be dominant over collective consciousness when they come into direct conflict." The insectoid Zixana queen clicked her mandibles in agitation. "How many of these mind-bridge ships do you possess?" Admiral Lee's smile was cold and professional. "That information is classified, but I will say this. The Taiguk was our first attempt at the technology. We've had 30 years to improve on the design." Fear began to replace confusion in the alien delegates. If humans had been secretly building weapons that could defeat entire fleets without firing a shot, how many more surprises did they have prepared? The tree being from Vorthak asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "What do you want from us? Surrender? Tribute? Submission to human authority?" "We want what we originally asked for," Hyunwoo replied simply. "Membership in the Galactic Council. Recognition as equals rather than pets to be kept in our home system. The right to expand and explore the galaxy like any other species." "And if we refuse?" demanded the crystalline delegate. "Then you refuse," Hyunwoo said with a shrug. "But understand that any future aggression against humanity will be met with the same response the hegemon fleet received. We don't want to conquer anyone, but we will defend ourselves by any means necessary." Dr. Yunseo added, "Some of your people have actually benefited from limited exposure to human consciousness. Several Morden individuals have reported that gaining individual awareness has enhanced their creativity and problem-solving abilities. A few hegemon soldiers have chosen to remain in human space, studying what they call the way of personal honor." This news caused another stir among the delegates. The idea that contact with human consciousness might actually improve other species was almost as disturbing as the idea that it could be used as a weapon. "Are you offering to share this individual consciousness with willing subjects?" asked a nervous representative of the aquatic depth swimmers. "We're offering cooperation," Hyunwoo replied. "Cultural exchange, scientific collaboration, the same things any civilization offers when joining an interstellar community. The difference is that now you know we're capable of defending ourselves." The session continued for hours as delegates argued among themselves and consulted with their home governments. Some species wanted immediate military action against humanity, despite the obvious risks. Others advocated for isolation, hoping to avoid any contact with human consciousness. A few progressive voices suggested that perhaps they could learn something from humanity's unique mental evolution. Finally, the council reached a decision. The vote was close, and many delegates abstained rather than choosing sides. But the result was clear. "The Galactic Council hereby grants full membership to the human species," announced the current council president, a being that looked like a walking crystal formation. "You will be accorded all rights and responsibilities of a galactic civilization, including the right to colonize uninhabited worlds and participate in interstellar commerce. However," the president continued, "we also establish new protocols regarding consciousness-based weapons. Any use of mental warfare against civilian populations will be considered a war crime under galactic law." Hyunwoo nodded acceptance. "Humanity agrees to these terms. We have no interest in using our abilities against peaceful civilizations." As the session ended and delegates began to leave, many cast fearful glances at the human representatives. The species they had once dismissed as harmless children were now recognized as potentially the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. Bo. 1 year after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. The crystal spires of Nexus Prime still gleamed with their eternal blue light, but the atmosphere in the great halls of government had changed, completely. Where once ancient civilizations had ruled with absolute confidence in their superiority, now they moved carefully through a universe where the balance of power had shifted forever. Captain Yoonji Seo stood on the bridge of the UHSS, Taeguk as it entered orbit around the diplomatic world. Her ship was no longer alone. 3 other vessels of the same massive class accompanied her, their dark hulls reflecting the light of Nexus Prime's sun. These were humanity's mind bridge ships, and their very presence in the system caused alien traffic controllers to speak in nervous whispers. "Docking clearance granted immediately, Captain," reported her communications officer. "No delays, no inspections, no questions asked." Yunji nodded with grim satisfaction. Fear was not the relationship she wanted between humanity and the galaxy, but respect built on fear was better than the mockery they had endured before. "Take us to the diplomatic berth, and keep the mind bridge array on standby, not active, just ready." The mere possibility that the human ships might activate their consciousness projection systems was enough to ensure cooperation from every species in the system. Word had spread throughout galactic civilization about what human minds could do to alien thoughts, and no one wanted to experience it firsthand. In the council chambers, Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim took his place at a seat that had been specially constructed for the human delegation. It was positioned not at the back with the observer species, but in the front row with the most powerful civilizations. The change in seating arrangements was symbolic of humanity's new status in galactic politics. The session was called to order by the council president, but even that ancient being seemed nervous as it spoke. "Today we address trade disputes between the Zixana Hive and the Vorthak Confederation. Ambassador Kim, as the appointed galactic mediator, please present your recommendations." The title of Galactic Mediator was new, created specifically for humanity after it became clear that no other species could safely arbitrate disputes without risking mental contamination from the human consciousness. Hyunwoo had become the galaxy's judge and jury not because anyone wanted him to be, but because he was the only being who could make decisions without fear of retaliation. "The Zixana claim that Vorthak colonies are interfering with their trade routes," Hyunwoo began, reviewing the data on his tablet. "The Vorthak claim they have ancient rights to those systems. After reviewing the evidence, I recommend a compromise. Shared administration of the disputed regions, with profits split 60-40 in favor of the Zixana to compensate for their higher investment in infrastructure." Both sides accepted the ruling immediately, without argument or negotiation. No one wanted to risk disagreeing with the species that could project madness across space with a thought. Dr. Minho Choi watched the proceedings from the observer gallery, taking notes on a device that looked deceptively simple but was actually recording quantum-level brainwave patterns from every being in the chamber. His research into xenopsychology had evolved far beyond its original military applications. "Fascinating," he murmured to his assistant, a young woman named Dr. Hai Jin. "The Mordun delegate is showing signs of individual consciousness development. Look at the neural patterns. Definitely more complex than the baseline collective readings we recorded last year." Indeed, the Mordun representative was one of several aliens who had chosen to undergo controlled exposure to human consciousness. The process was dangerous and not always successful, but those who survived reported experiences that their species had never known before: personal creativity, individual ambition, and the strange joy of having thoughts that belonged to no one else. "How many volunteers are we up to now?" Dr. Hai-Jin asked. 47 successful conversions across 6 species, Dr. Minho replied. "The Mordun seem to adapt best. Their energy-based consciousness is more flexible than biological neural networks. The hegemon have the hardest time, but those who manage the transition often become exceptional leaders." Not everyone in the galaxy welcomed these changes. Several species had chosen complete isolation rather than risk exposure to human consciousness. They sealed their borders, recalled their ambassadors, and retreated into their own territories to avoid any possibility of mental contamination. But others embraced the opportunity. The Shard Collective had established an entire research institute dedicated to studying individual consciousness, hoping to unlock creativity that their crystalline minds had never possessed. Young members of various species sometimes ran away from home to seek out human colonies, desperate to experience what they called the loneliness of freedom. Captain Dae-hyun Park commanded one of humanity's new embassy ships, vessels designed to safely interact with alien civilizations without causing unwanted mental effects. His ship, the UES Harmony, used carefully tuned shielding to contain human consciousness while still allowing normal diplomatic contact. "Sir," reported his science officer, "we're receiving a request from the depth swimmer homeworld. They want to establish formal trade relations, but they're asking for guarantees that their aquatic neural networks won't be affected by proximity to our crew. Dae-hyun nodded. This was a common concern now. Grant their request, full consciousness containment, protocols during all interactions, and remind them that they can end the negotiations at any time if they feel uncomfortable. The depth swimmers were one of several species that had chosen cautious engagement with humanity. They wanted the benefits of human technology and mediation services, but they were terrified of losing their collective identity to individual consciousness. It was a delicate balance, and one that required constant attention from human diplomats. On Earth itself, the changes were even more dramatic. The planet that had once been dismissed as a backwater world was now the unofficial capital of galactic civilization. Alien embassies lined the streets of New Geneva, and delegations from across the galaxy came to seek audiences with human leaders. Admiral So-Jin Lee had been promoted to Fleet Admiral and now commanded not just humanity's secret navy, but a growing alliance of species that had chosen to align themselves with human interests. Her flagship, the newest and largest of the Mind Bridge vessels, was called the UHSS Unity, a name that represented humanity's hope for the future. Fleet status report, she requested from her command staff. 12 Mind Bridge-class vessels now. Operational, reported her aide, now Captain Jun-ho. Construction continuing on 8 more. The new designs incorporate improvements based on our experience with alien neural structures. Any resistance movements? 3 species have formed what they call the Pure Thought Alliance, Jun-ho replied. They're demanding that the Council ban human consciousness projection as a weapon of mass destruction, but they're not getting much support. Everyone remembers what happened to the Hegemon fleet. Admiral Lee nodded grimly. The Pure Thought Alliance was made up of species that had never adapted well to the new galactic order. They saw human consciousness as a contamination that threatened the natural order of the universe. Some of their extremist factions had even suggested that humanity should be quarantined or eliminated entirely. But such ideas had little support among the major powers. The benefits of human mediation were too valuable, and the risks of opposing humanity were too great. No one wanted to face the fate of Veltar's fleet. Dr. Yoon Seo Park, now director of the Institute for Consciousness Studies, worked with researchers from dozens of species to better understand the phenomenon of individual awareness. Her laboratory on Luna Base had become one of the most important scientific facilities in the galaxy. The implications are staggering, she explained to a group of visiting alien scientists who maintained careful neural shields during their visit. Individual consciousness isn't just a different way of thinking. It's a fundamental evolutionary advantage that your species never developed. The ability to make decisions without group consensus, to have truly original ideas, to take personal responsibility for actions. These traits allowed humans to advance rapidly, despite our technological disadvantages. One of the visiting researchers, a Vorthak scientist whose tree-like form towered over the humans, asked, "Is it possible that our species could evolve these traits naturally, given enough time?" "Possibly," Dr. Yunseo replied. "But evolution works on geological timescales. The controlled exposure process we've developed can achieve the same results in months rather than millions of years. The question is whether your species are willing to accept the risks and changes involved." The risks were real. Not every alien who underwent consciousness conversion survived the process with their sanity intact. Some became lost in the labyrinth of individual thought, unable to function without the collective support they had always known. Others became obsessed with human culture and lost all connection to their own species. But the successes were remarkable. Converted aliens often became bridges between human and alien cultures, translating concepts that had previously been incomprehensible to their own species. They became artists, inventors, and philosophers whose